Welcome to the I Get Better podcast with your hosts, Charlene Renee and Phaedra Smith, where we discuss topics related to life, love, mental, physical, and spiritual health, and how we can all get better together.
Okay, welcome back to the I Get Better podcast. I'm your host, Charlene Renee.
And this is Phaedra Smith.
And today we're going to be talking about how I get better at relationships. Now, this is the first episode in a 4-part series. For the first episode in the series, we're going to be talking about family relationships. And in the upcoming episodes, you're going to be hearing more about how to get better at friendships and also how to get better at romantic or couple relationships. And that's actually going to be a 2-part series, so you're really not going to want to miss that. So let's go ahead and jump right in on our family episode.
All right, I'm excited about this one.
Me too. Family relationships are so important. They're such a huge part of our lives. So it's definitely important for us to get better at maintaining and building those relationships.
They really do make up the foundation of who we are, and kind of like the relationships that we have outside of the family kind of sometimes are dictated by their family relationships. So it is a very important episode. I'm excited.
Me too. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Of course, we like to start you off with the actual Webster or Merriam's version definition of what the word means. So for family, the dictionary definition of family is a group consisting of parents and children living together in a household, or it could be defined as all the descendants of a common ancestor. So when we're talking about family, or when you hear the word family, usually you're going to think of your blood relatives, people who you are related to by blood. But
Right.
Of course, life will teach you that there are many other types of family relationships, and we're going to get into that in a bit. But we want to go ahead and get you the literal definition. And then we like to give you our own personal definition as well. So, Phaedra, what would you say your definition of family is?
Well, kind of like you said, it's people that are related by blood, but I like to see it as people that are related by some type of like even just a non-biological likeness. So things that you have in common could make up a family. So I guess my real definition of family really doesn't have anything to do with blood. It has everything to do with what makes a family a real family, such as loyalty and just the small things. I think that anyone can be there for you for the big stuff. People donate all day long, like things to the homeless, things that don't require a whole lot of time and effort. But I think it's the small things that really make up that quality relationship that you would really see in a family member.
Right. So you could be family with anybody, essentially.
Right. In my definition, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a combination for me. It is your family who you are related to by blood, but you can, through life kind of adopt other people into your family. And I've done that. So, and we're going to talk about that more when we talk about the types of family relationships and kind of go through that. And we're just going to touch on that briefly and then jump into our reasons why and how you can get better at building those family relationships and maintaining them. Healthy family relationships. That's a big part of this, is just wanting to work on getting better at healthy family relationships. So, the first relationships you ever have in life are with your family. Even if you're adopted or you go into an alternate family situation, someone is there to care for you, typically. And that becomes your family. So the first relationship before you ever have any friends, babies don't have friends, typically, not living ones. They may have a doll or something that they're close to, but your family is your first relationship. So that's why it is something that should become a priority in your life when it comes to getting better, because those are the people that are typically going to be with you from birth to death. So those are your longest lasting relationships and your first relationship. So when we talk about the different types of families, typically what people think of is your FOO, your family of origin. So that's your family, especially as therapists, we refer to family of origin issues, we're talking about family issues that come from
Your
the
original
birth family, right?
Yeah.
Your parents, your siblings, your family that you were born into. So that's what we're gonna talk about first. But then there's also different types of families, such as when you grow up, you get into what's called the nuclear family. So that might be your own family that you live in. So your spouse, your husband, your wife, and your children. So that is now your nuclear family. And then beyond that, you may have your extended family. So your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, your grandparents, all the other members of the family, and so on and so forth. So then you might have like more of what you were talking about, Phaedra, which is your adoptive family, people who in your life that you become close to, who aren't related to you by blood, but they show those family loyalty qualities that allow them to be put in that position where now that's not just your friend, but that's your sister, or that's your cousin, or that's your auntie, or whoever, whatever role you want to put them in. And then you have like other families, right? So you have like maybe a church family or a community family or some organization you might be a part of that you consider a type of family as well. So you have all different types of family communities per se, but typically when we're talking about family, the first thing people think of is your blood relatives and the people who live in the house with you.
Right.
Whether you're, growing up or you've gotten a house of your own and you've formed your own family apart from your parents. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to get into a little discussion on what are some common struggles that we see in family relationships, the types of issues that typically arise in a family relationship. What are some barriers to keeping those close connections and keeping dysfunction out of the family relationship? And then also we're going to talk about some ways to get better at family relationships. So, Phaedra, why don't you tell us about some of what's those common struggles or conflicts that you see in family relationships?
So some of the things that I notice in some of the, just being a therapist, but also just being a human and being in a family, one of the things I've noticed is acceptance is a huge part of conflict in relationships with your family members. So when we're related to people, we often somehow take on a form of almost like you think people should be psychics. Like you think you're a psychic, and we automatically assume that a person is or should be a certain way because we grew up with them or because they're our cousin and we knew them way back. And I think this makes it harder for people to sometimes like one another and have healthy relationships because it's hard for them to accept that this person might not be how they thought they were going to be, or that this person is different from other people in their family. And especially when this person changes maybe in a healthy way or unhealthy way.
So people cannot accept their family member for who they are.
Correct.
And they're expecting them to be a certain way.
Correct.
Okay.
I think that's a huge problem, especially when people turn out and it can be disappointing. They turn out to be or act certain ways that you don't really expect them to be or act. And I could just hear some of my parents and family saying now they know better. Like, what does that mean? They know, but it's like we all been raised in this community and there were these spoken and unspoken rules and everybody should know better. And so, I think that that's a part of it is like, they should have known better. So yeah, acceptance is a huge thing that I've come to see. What about you?
Well, quite a few things. I think just a few that I'll touch on because there's quite a few issues that arise in family, especially when I see families for therapy. One thing is the communication is a big thing.
Yeah.
Communication issues arise in a family, especially between parents and children, namely adolescents, but even young children can have some communication difficulties with their parents, and then communications between parents spouses or relatives, whoever's in the house can bring up areas of conflict. Another issue is having issues with adapting to when the family dynamics change. And
Yes.
so when there's a thing called the family life cycle, and so there's a difference in what the family looks like in 1 year, two people get married, no children. Then you add children into the mix. Then the children become school age. Then the children become adolescent age or teenage. Then they go out of the house to college age. Now the parents are older. And so now they're entering into a different phase of life. And then, now they may have to take care of elders. And so there's a family life cycle and some adjustments that have to be made. And if people are unable to navigate those adjustments and deal with them in a healthy way, there can become a whole lot of tension and conflict because people don't know what to do, or they have those expectations of each other that life is no longer going to fit into those expectations because the people are changing. And so, and then you also have mental health issues that cause strain and struggle for the family. So for example, if a person in the family has a actual diagnosed mental health issue, or even undiagnosed, such as depression or a substance abuse issue, then that is going to affect everybody in the household. And so it's not just that one person's problem, it's a family problem. But what we'll often find is that one person will come in and say, this person is the problem and they're doing this and they're doing that, but they don't realize it's a family issue. Everybody plays a part and a role in maintaining the issue. And so that's what I come to see a lot of. It's just inability to deal with when things change, and also not addressing those mental health issues that may be causing dysfunction within the family.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. My own family, we've, I think most families have seen it's a problems with adjustment, and with my grandmother getting older and things changing with her, and those are things that you just don't expect. I mean, life happens, and people gonna mature and get older, but you don't always expect some of the hurdles that come up. And I think one of the biggest problems, you're right, is that we don't know how to handle those changes, and people don't reach out for help and get the right resources that they should get, especially depending on the type of family. So I know a lot of African American families, we're very much, let's take care of it ourselves. And so we don't always reach out and get resources as our other counterparts do. We don't always utilize the help of the community like we should, because a lot of things are kind of kept in-house. And so I do think that those things serve as a detriment, especially to our culture of people. So I totally agree with that. On the parent note, one of the things I encounter a lot is this power struggle between parents and children. And the world has changed so much in a lot of ways where you just can't always whoop your kids like you used to, like some people used to. Like, I feel like I remember my mom saying, you don't know what a whooping is. Like, but even nowadays, I talk to parents and stuff, and I'm like, listen, it's not about winning in the way that you want to win all the time. Sometimes you have to win in a different way, giving them choices. But those are things that it was like, you don't have a choice. I didn't grow up like that. So,
well, that's a good point you make about the power struggles. I want to speak to that and then the second part, which was discipline, in a way, because we're going to do a whole show on parenting soon. However, just to touch on that piece about discipline and power struggle and the change that's happened in the generation and the culture, what you don't have, which we didn't mention before when I was talking about the types of family, was that village mentality, where you used to have that it takes a village to raise a child. So the village was your family, not just the people in your four walls of your house. And so you had more community, you had more extended family connections, and things were, I want to say, easier because you had so many resources and so much help. And I think that is another issue, is that, like you said, keeping things within the house, you hold the issue in, but you also limit your resources, because there are resources that can be found outside of your house. You don't necessarily have to go to therapy, counseling, but you may need to. But even if you go outside of your four walls to seek out other resources in your community, that's still beneficial. But the part about the power struggle, that reminds me of the concept of a family structure. And the thing nowadays is there's so many different types of family structure. It's no longer just the typical mom, dad, 2 kids, and a dog. It's so many different family dynamics. You know, you can have 2 dads in the home. You might have 2 moms in the home. You might have a single mom in the home. You may have a single dad in the home. You may have a grandma and no mom and dad in the home. You may have a auntie and no grandma and no mom and dad in the home. And so it's so many different ways that the family structure has changed. So the power struggle sometimes come in where children don't know their role in the family, and they don't know their role in the household, and the parents may not know their role, which is when you may have those parents who want to be friends, which we're going to talk about friend relationships, but that's a different dynamic, you know, being a friend and being a parent, or being a child under authority and being a friend are 2 different things. So that's a lot of what I see with families is the structure and the roles aren't clearly defined. Yeah. And the family values aren't clearly defined.
Yeah.
Because that's really where when you say that you know better, or you know they know better, that really is talking about a value.
Yeah.
That they expect everybody in the family to uphold. Right. And if you don't, something's wrong with you.
Right.
And it might be an unwritten rule. You know, every family has these rules.
Yeah.
That are unwritten or unspoken, but everybody just kind of knows this is what we do. This is what our tribe does, you know, right. And this is what's expected of us. So you're right, when somebody kind of goes off the path and does their own thing, that can cause problems and conflict as well.
Well, what about in those situations where people are given a role by their family? So, you know, I mean, and the role isn't necessarily healthy. So, or a label. So you can label kids or your children as the angry one, or the anxiety riddled one, or the perfect one. Oh, that's the straight, that's my nerd, you know? And so
well, you're gonna have that because people need something to connect to you, you know. It's like people don't like change, right? It's just honestly, it's so easy to get familiar with the familiar. So it's like, I see you doing something, so I'm gonna try to box it into a common thing because it's easier for me to digest you when you're one thing than if you're book smart and you like to dance and you like to fix things and you like, that's just too much. Just find one thing, sit down and do that. You know, it's too much for me to get used to you in all these different forms. It's easier for me to just see you this one way, because if you're different, then that means I have to be different.
Right. But that's where we get into that problem sometimes with acceptance. When that child does not turn out to be that doctor or that.
Well, you know, there's also cultures. There's many, that goes into like a cultural thing too, because in some cultures and ethnicities, you are expected to just do what your parents tell you to do. Yeah. And they may want you to be a doctor. And if you don't, then you're not following tradition, and you're going to bring shame to your family if you do something else. And it's important to uphold the name or the wants of the family and what's best for the family more than that individuality.
Well, that goes in. Sorry about that. That goes into expectations, right?
Expectations, tradition, and beliefs too. Sometimes there's a spiritual belief behind it, and so that's when you have to be sensitive to behind that history and that tradition within the family. Because in many different cultures, the family roles look totally different, right? The man has a role, the woman has a role, and that's just it. In this westernized culture, which we were born and raised in, it looks different than maybe in an Eastern society or some other, even maybe an African society or some other culture, where what goes on in our world and what's normal for our family would not be acceptable to anyone else. Right. And but it might be working for us, it might be healthy for us, and we're functioning well and we're getting along and we're close and we're doing what we need to do. But that dynamic might totally throw somebody totally into a whirlwind. who isn't subscribing to that.
Right.
And so when we're talking about getting better at family relationships, it starts from within, because you have a self apart from your family, but your family is a part of you. And so you need to be able to balance that and find that clarity in who you are within the family and without. Otherwise, you can run into some crisis or some identity issues and a struggle, mental struggle, between not being able to have that individuality and be clear about yourself as an individual and yourself within your family.
Right. When you talk about culture, you know, you have those Western culture, but I feel like you also have these cultures within cultures within cultures. And so you do have a lot of, for many people, it's very difficult because there's layers. You know, not only am I in this American culture, but also I'm African American, or, you know, I'm some other type of American. And then not only am I that, but I'm also a woman, you know, or I'm also a gay woman or a gay man. Like, there's so many things. So to really search yourself internally and to also figure out where you fit into the family and how you want your family to look, there are some layers.
Yeah, and it's not just black and white. There's no just one right way or one thing to be, but it's really something we want to bring to the awareness of our listeners, is that family relationships are important. It doesn't matter who you are, you have a family somewhere. No one just came from the sky. You know, everyone was born into and from a family, and you don't necessarily get to pick who they are. But what you have is something important to work with. Now, I know there are people who are estranged from their family, or they've been cut off from their family for one reason or another, and there may be very valid reasons for that.
Right.
But you still have a family somewhere, even if you don't communicate with them. And so they're still a part of you out there in the world somewhere.
Which I think on that note, I think that you take, whether it's, you know, you've had a bad situation or not a great family, I think there's even lessons in that you say, okay, this is what I don't want to be, and figuring out how do I get better, and how do I not perpetuate this family curse, so to speak, that has run rampant in my family. What are some things that I can do to break that cycle? Even if I don't necessarily talk to my family for good reason, how do I become better and have my future generations become better from me changing that, breaking that cycle? I think it's important either way, because there are people that some of my clients, I'm like, yeah, you don't need to talk to them anymore. I don't care if they're your mama or daddy. Like, that's not healthy. But I also think that there's something to be said about even those relationships that, like you said, they are your family. Those are things that, you know, you cannot deny. Whether you choose to have boundaries around what that looks like or not, that might be something that you want to think about. But we all have something to learn from and take from our family.
Right. And then, like you said, there's layers and there's different roles that you play in different family settings. Like, you're not necessarily going to play the same role in your family of origin that you do in your nuclear family. Because for example, in my family of origin, I'm a daughter and I'm a sister. And so that's the role I play. And I'm a niece and I'm a cousin. But in my nuclear family, I'm a mother. And so that role is different.
Right.
Or I might be a wife, and that role is different in that family setting. So when I go to my mother's house, I'm in the daughter role, even though I'm a mother, you know? Right. And so it switches, you know, you still have to be that. Even in adulthood, you know, you grow up and you're still somebody's baby, you know. You know, parents will always say, it don't matter how old you get, you always gonna be my baby. My mom says that all the time. So I want us now kind of to address that, how to get better at family, and what are just a few things we can do. This is a topic I think we can come back to and dive into those different role relationships piece by piece, especially the parenting one.
Yeah.
And then even, you know, some mother-daughter relationships, or parent-child relationships issues. But I want to kind of talk about what are just a few ways that we can get better at building healthy family relationships.
Yeah, I was thinking, I go back to acceptance and not putting people in a box. I think that
You
opens.
really like acceptance. Who didn't accept you?
It's real. I just think it's
Let's
important.
talk about it.
Let's talk about it
because somebody did not accept you, and we need to get them. We gonna jump on their head because this is coming out. I'm hearing it.
I'm telling you, I not only from my life, but also just people I have counseled. People you just assume people are supposed to be this type of person, and it's okay for change. People let people live their best life, but also
let people do them is what you're saying. Let them just be who they want to be, even if it's not being the doctor that you wanted them to be, or the lawyer, or the dentist, or the nurse.
Let the church say amen.
Okay,
but
so also getting better at healthy family relationships means getting better at acceptance.
Acceptance.
We have an episode on acceptance, but
forgiveness, respect.
Okay, so let's stay on the forgiveness piece a little bit. So we talked about briefly how there are some family relationships that are strained or cut off, what we call cut off, where you don't talk to so-and-so, you haven't seen them in so long, they did something to you, they lied on you, they stole from you, whatever the case may be, but you don't talk to that person in your family anymore.
Yeah, so, I think that's a big thing.
Forgiveness. Do you think that it is possible to heal from that and forgive and reconcile those family relationships where someone has been hurt or mistreated?
I struggle often with the Phaedra part and then also the Phaedra as a therapist part, because the Phaedra as a therapist part says, listen, you need to have boundaries. And, and the healthy person, just who I've learned how to be just in my personal life, you do need to have boundaries. There's no way to not get hurt and live a fulfilled life. There's no way to walk around with a wall and to also be able to live, because if you wall yourself off to the negative stuff, you're also walling yourself off to the positive things. But I think in order to live a healthy and balanced life, you should be open, but with boundaries. And so when we talk about forgiveness, I do think that there are cases where things have been done that absolutely you should forgive, because forgiveness is for yourself. As we've talked about in our earlier podcast, we have a whole episode on forgiveness, so y'all should check it out. But just we wrestle with this thing oftentimes, and I can only speak as an African-American woman from an African-American culture, from a also religious background. There is this huge elephant in the room when we talk about forgiveness and what that should look like. And as I have grown up, I have realized that, yes, I should forgive, and I should especially forgive my family, but that doesn't mean that I have to have a relationship with you. As sad as that might seem, and as much grief as I might feel, I do think that there should be some kind of boundaries in that, and saying, just because you're my family doesn't mean that I have to continue to have a toxic relationship in my life. So forgiveness is one thing, but also having that person in your life is a whole nother thing.
Okay. Well, my own personal take on that is I've just honestly had to forgive a lot of stuff from my family. I've had several different people who are related to me do things to me that weren't good, and I could have held a grudge, and I could have just said, you know what, I'm done with you, I'm not going to talk to you. But it just really wasn't in my heart to be that way. Like, it's too much work for me to hold that type of hurt and pain in my heart, or even ill will towards these people who are my blood relatives. So I just I let it go. And in some cases, I will set a boundary. But for the most part, I just love them all the same. It's just really, life is too short. I just say, you know what? They did that. They made a mistake. And, I'll be mad about it, but it's not something that I really have ever gotten to the point where I'll cut off and just not talk to, not see, not say hello, like just have hatred towards anybody in my family, my blood family.
Do you think you have more grace because it is your blood family than you would with other people?
Definitely, because I've just always been close to my family. For me, family has always represented a happy and good time. And so it's like the good always outweighs the bad for me when it comes to family. And so these are my people. Like, I just can't see I guess the bad, it washes away a little bit. You know, it's overrun by, as a whole, my family is good. And so, and not just say good or bad, but they bring me joy, I should say, more than they've ever brought me pain.
Well, I also think you are a slight optimist, and I think that's a great thing, that quality to have. I think, listen, I'm not trying to be the Debbie Downer, but I think in one of my jobs, one of my many jobs I have, is I work with sexual and physical abuse. And so oftentimes people in that come through our center, we talk about forgiveness, but also what it looks like to have forgiveness with boundaries, and also cutting people off, because sometimes you do, for the health of yourself and for the safety of yourself and your children and your future generations, there are people that you have to cut off because they're dangerous. They're dangerous to your mental health. They're dangerous to your physical health. And so I want to just be clear, even to the audience, that while forgiveness is important, it also is very important for you to learn how to live a lot, how to make decisions based off of what's safe also. You know, so in some cases you have family members that are not safe. And
you want people to know that they do have permission to do that. You don't have to just, you do not have to just forgive and forget and continue to maintain family relationships just because they're family.
Correct.
And that I do agree with. I don't say that. I don't think in my case I do it just because they're family. I think it's just the offense isn't so bad that I can cut. You know, it hasn't been that. And so another point I want to make before we wrap up here shortly is, this is one thing I just have to say. I have to get this off my chest for getting better at family relationships. This is what I speak from experience, but one of the issues I see in the African American community and family, because that's the only experience I can speak to, is family members do not communicate well, and they keep a lot of secrets. And there's a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be kept a secret, but for some reason people will have certain people in the family that they'll share things with, and now it's a secret and it's don't tell nobody. And then I also have a family that likes to gossip, so they tell everybody anyway, but it's like, you can't ever just be free to just bring this information up. Why does everything have to be a secret? And it just grinds my gears, because it'll be something that is not that big of a deal, but people just don't feel comfortable letting it all out, you know, laying their cards on the table. I don't know if there's some embarrassment or some shame or whatever it may be, but everybody's just holding their cards so close to their chest, and we can't ever talk about issues when that happens. It's like we only want to talk about good things. Like whenever we're talking, it's everybody's okay. But behind closed doors is, shh, don't tell nobody, but let me tell you what happened. So it's not all okay all the time. It's okay for it not to be all okay all the time, but stop thinking that everything has to be a secret.
I have to jump on the podium also on that, because one of the things when we were and I was getting my notes together, even just about family secrets, I was like, I got a lot to say, but I'm gonna keep it short. I think oftentimes family curses or these cycles, and I also call them isms, like alcoholism or addictions or all these things, these isms, that they get kept alive through family secrets. So oftentimes you look back, and when these unexplainable things or gaps in time that make it hard to repair relationships, make it hard for people to heal, or make it hard for people to communicate, they come from these secrets that haven't been talked about. And so I have some of my clients look back at and do out like timelines or whatever their life, or these, what do you call them, these family trees or whatever. And they look back and it's like, oh, well, my great grandfather was an alcoholic, or this also happened in this.
Oh yeah,
so,
like a genogram where you show like those different levels. Yeah, so that's something where you can see visibly those patterns of behaviors that have happened generation to generation. It just comes through.
But when you don't have the information, it's very hard for you to see that you aren't the first person that this happened to. And that oftentimes in the abuse treatment that I do, when I start getting information on the family of origin and things like that, I often trace back sexual abuse and physical abuse from generations. It's not the first time. It just didn't happen to this little child. It was her mom, it happened to her mom, and then it happened to the mom's mom, or even just like getting pregnant at a young age. These things are just generational.
And then you maintain the secret because if you're going through it, you'll think you're the only one, and so you won't want to tell anybody.
Correct.
And so now that cycle continues of not only the abuse or the issue that keeps happening over and over, but the secret becomes a pattern.
Correct.
And I mean, keeping a secret becomes now a pattern of behavior that this is what we do in this family. We don't tell people when something bad happens.
Right.
Number one, we'll be ashamed or embarrassed because we think we're the only one. Even though this person who's gone through it may be able to help you and guide you and provide support for you through the process, but you don't know that. And so now you're going through it all alone. And then now you may distance yourself from the family. And now they're like, well, you acting funny.
Not only you. If you look at it, we're not just individuals. There's this whole third entity, this family entity, that if we look at it as a body in itself, how sick are our family entities? How many secrets are left there that when you look at this family as a body, how it's riddled with disease and these generational curses and a lot of them come from secrets and from mental health and from all these things that if we would reach out to our resources and not keep these secrets, we could potentially start to heal the family so that as the generations grow and get older, they could be healthier generations, healthier families. But because we do keep these family secrets because of shame and embarrassment or stubbornness, there are so many things that perpetuate themselves. Because I don't want to get it, but even in the spiritual realm, that's exactly where sin lives, in the dark, and so we continue to kind of live in the dark and keep our families in the dark, and we perpetuate these unhealthy and these really sick families and these generations that continue to be sick because of some of these secrets. So, I mean, it's really a different way to look at it. Also, we're not just individuals with these things that happen to us, but we are a family, and we're perpetuating the sickness within the family by keeping these secrets.
And my point is, let the secrets out. Okay, just let them out the bag. And it's not so much. I mean, that doesn't mean just tell all your business, because everybody's going to have their own private business that they want to keep to themselves and keep away. Because some people you just can't trust with your secrets in the family, or you can't trust them to be helpful, and so you do want to have some discernment with that, and not just, some people in the family aren't going to give you good advice, and they're just going to steer you in the wrong direction. But for major issues and things, or even certain things, I think it really does more harm than good to keep it a secret. And I don't like that. I think that eventually, if these secrets don't come out, they're going to die, with the person who's holding them. And then 3 generations later, they may never know why they're experiencing that thing, because the person who knew it, they've already gone on and passed away, and no one was there to keep telling the story.
Right.
And so it's important to get the story, sit down with the elders in the family, sit down with your aunts and your uncles and your great aunts and your great uncles and your grandparents, and find out what's really going on. And that's something you can do at the next barbecue or the next party. for next, Thanksgiving is coming soon, and that's typically a time where families get together and sit down and have a real life conversation with your family, because typically what you'll find is everybody's smiling and happy and saying, hey, how you been doing? And everybody's answer is usually good. Where's the food? I'm ready to eat. And no one's really sitting down and really telling the truth. Maybe they're not so good. Maybe they are struggling with something. Maybe there is an issue that they need to address. But if you don't open the door for it and give them opportunity and let them know this is an accepting environment, and understanding environment, then you'll never know what could have become of that. And so, as we get ready to wrap up, I think the one other thing that ties into that acceptance is getting understanding. Start to find out more about each person and what kind of makes them who they are and what makes them tick, and try to understand them for who they are as a person, not just as your family member, not just as your sister, or not just as your brother, but who are they, and get that understanding of them so that you can relate to them in a better way, and the communication can be better. Because honestly, I have siblings that I don't really hardly talk to, and I don't know what's going on in their everyday life, and I really want to get better at that. I do need to put my intentions on strengthening those connections and gaining more understanding of who they are, and see if maybe they need some help with something, and reach out and open the door to them, because it is easy as you break away from your family of origin to get in your own little world.
Right.
To get in your own little house with your own little family, and to kind of keep a loose connection with the people who raised you and who you grew up with, and not really keep that bond tight.
I agree too. I think this conversation was really rich.
Well, I think we could keep the conversation going offline with our listeners. We really want to hear from you on any family related issues, or something that has worked for you in rebuilding bonds with your family, or things that your family does, family traditions or values that you feel like came up to the forefront in your family, and how that impacts you today. And so we want you to reach out to us, hit us up on our social media page at the I Get Better podcast. You can also find us on Twitter. You can find us on Instagram. You can email us. We're everywhere now, so you can contact us and keep this conversation going. And I really want to challenge everyone, including myself, is to kind of go back and reach out to your family in the next 30 days and try to get better at one relationship within the family. Whether if you want to reconnect with the parent, you want to reconnect with the sibling, you want to just not necessarily reconnect, but strengthen a relationship with a family member or more than one family member, do that. Set your intention on that and go for it and get better at that this month. All right, so that's our show for today. So make sure that you like, rate, subscribe, and comment on this episode. Continue to hit us up with questions and comments about what you want to hear. And remember to keep getting better in order to do better so that you can live better.